And welcome back to the WHIG TV Morning Show. Thank you, as always, Fred, for the weather forecast. We appreciate that. A little bit of a roller coaster in the weather.
It really is.
This week.
And I believe Fred said April is going to be cooler than March.
Yeah, wow.
Did I hear you say that, Fred?
That is correct.
All right. Well, you know, we knew.
We're going in the wrong direction.
I know. It's like the teasing summer in March and then going back to some cooler. But I am a little bit disappointed that we went the entire winter with literally no snow.
I know.
You know, you feel like you got to have a little bit of snow.
Got to have a little bit.
Well,
we didn't get any.
before Sandra introduces our guest, we mentioned the situation with David Joyner, the tragic passing of his brother in that tragic shooting last week. He's texting me some information. The funeral for David's brother will be this Thursday at 12 p.m. at Ebenezer Baptist Church here in Rocky Mount. The viewing will be Wednesday at Stokes Mortuary from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. He gave me permission to mention that on the air and invite those that would like to come and lend some support to his family during this tragic time. So once again, the viewing Wednesday 3 to 7 at Stokes Mortuary. Funeral 12 p.m. Ebenezer Baptist Church. Come on out and show your support for our own David Joyner and his family during this tragic time. So, Sandra, I'll turn the time over to you now to introduce our guest this morning.
We have with us Dan Forrest, candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Absolutely. Let's start off by letting you tell us a little bit about Dan Forrest.
Sure. Well, my background's not politics, for one. My background is architecture and business.
I saw that.
I was a senior partner and office president with the largest architecture firm in the state.
Wow.
Worked there for 23 years, and about 2 years ago now, I walked away from that to get into public service to go serve the people in North Carolina. So we've been out running across the state for a little over a year now. We've traveled over 100,000 miles and been to most of the counties in the state multiple times, and we're having a good time meeting the people around the state.
I asked him a couple of the most pertinent questions. Is he a Newton, Carolina fan?
Now, which one did you say?
And
my son's at Carolina. My son's at Carolina. My money's at Carolina, so I'm a Carolina fan.
See, that's why I invited him.
I know.
Not because he was a Duke fan.
I'm
that's
the most
for sure.
well-known Duke fan in Rocky Mount. So.
You're the one.
Okay. I'm the one you
and
hear
y'all
about.
lost out first, okay?
I know. And also, I asked him if he golfed.
Okay.
Which he does. So
that was important.
Two important questions about his personal life that
That's important to us, right?
That's right. I have to know that. I have to know that. So what else you want to share to let us know who you are?
Well, we live in Raleigh with my family. We have 4 kids. My wife Alice and I have 4 kids. We've been married 20 years. Our oldest son Jake is at Chapel Hill. We have a daughter that's 16, son that's 13, and a daughter that's 7 as well.
Great.
Right, so you got every
family.
Every gamut.
Got it covered. We're a homeschool family. We've homeschooled our kids all the way through. So yeah.
Okay.
Dan, did you just wake up one day and say, because you're an architect?
Yeah.
Did you just wake up one day and, I mean, what happened? Why are you running?
Well, I wouldn't say it was just waking up one day, but I had a burden for my country. I mean, I really did. It was a burden that went on for quite a while, and didn't really consider getting in politics. I come from a political family, and my mother is her name's Sue Meyer. She's a congresswoman from Charlotte.
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely. I didn't know that was your mother.
Yeah, so I've grown up in a political family, but I never really had the urge to run for political office. But I really, probably like a lot of people in our country, sitting around watching our country go in the wrong direction, and knowing that I couldn't sit around and complain about it anymore. I really felt strongly that I had to get into the mix and do something about it. And I really feel that we have a leadership crisis in North Carolina, and really in America as well. But you know, I have to always couch this by saying that our legislature is doing a great job. I think our Republican-controlled legislature, for the first time in 140 years, is passing the kind of legislation that I agree with, and I think a lot of people in North Carolina agree with. But our leadership team is not working on their side, and so we need some strong, kind of bold, courageous leaders to get into government in Raleigh and start to fix some of these problems.
As you mentioned, some of the, in your opinion, some of the necessary changes or steps are being made, but it's one thing to kind of take that first step and make the change, but have someone that can kind of see it through Is that something that you see yourself, one of your strengths, being able to kind of see that process or that transition that you mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one, as I mentioned, I have a business background, but two, being an architect. You know, as architects, we're either naturally or by training, we're visionaries, we're planners, creative problem solvers, consensus builders. That's what we do for a living, and we do that every day. And I think that's well suited for government, especially the executive branch of government. You know, we've seen for years this trend towards political incivility, where two sides of the aisle don't talk to each other. They don't even like each other anymore. And I think we've got to find our way back to political civility in America if we really want to turn our country around.
I totally agree.
Absolutely.
Now, Dan, a lot of people say, "Oh, Lieutenant Governor, that they don't do anything." A lot of people. Explain to us what the Lieutenant Governor does, because the Lieutenant Governor, if I'm not mistaken, is the second highest office in the state.
That's right. That's right.
So they are important.
Absolutely. In case of emergency, if anything happened to the governor, Lieutenant Governor becomes the governor.
Yep,
it's happened 5 times in our state's history. So it could happen again. God forbid it does, but it could happen again. So you really do need to pay attention to that role. It's important.
Absolutely.
Lieutenant Governor is the president of the Senate, so he presides over the Senate on a daily basis, casts a tie-breaking vote in case of indecision.
And that could really be important.
Could be. It was when Beverly Perdue cast a tie-breaking vote for the lottery in our state.
Exactly.
So it's happened from the Lieutenant Governor's position.
Exactly right.
He's also a member of the Council of State, which is the executive governing body of leadership in the state. So that's elected by popular vote. That includes Secretary of State, Attorney General, Treasurer, Auditor, the commissioners, and so forth. There's 9 of them. And then by Constitution, the Lieutenant Governor sits on the State School Board. He also sits on the North Carolina Board of Community Colleges, North Carolina Board of Economic Development.
Wow.
Has a lot of education and economic development appointment powers, and then has some law enforcement appointment powers as well.
Well, also is another thing is we were only one that has power in legislative and executive branches of the state government
At the same time, yeah.
So that is and the only person to be able
right.
to do that. So I mean, it's, as we mentioned, is very, very important.
That's right.
Very, very important here. What would you say, Dan, is the, and I know there's many obstacles out there, many things, issues that need to be addressed. If you could put your thumb on one, what would you say is the biggest issue that you would face as Lieutenant Governor, and how would you plan to tackle that?
Well, I think number one in our state right now should be jobs. There's people all over our state that are just really hurting. You look at the unemployment rate in our state right now, it's about 17.6%, maybe even higher. That's called U6 unemployment, and that's the number that includes really everybody, all the people that are not on unemployment anymore, the people that have given up hope, the people that are underemployed that would like to have full-time employment and so forth, and that's about getting close to 20% in our state. That's just really unsustainable. So we have to look at doing some things differently than we've done in the past. One, we have the 44th worst business tax climate in the country. So we have the highest corporate income tax rate in the Southeast, the highest gas tax rate in the Southeast, one of the highest personal income tax rates in the country. And if you figure that the majority of our businesses in North Carolina are not corporations, they're small businesses, they get taxed at the personal tax rate level. And so we need to really create a strong level playing field across the board for all businesses in North Carolina, get our business tax climate in order. And then you'll see businesses starting to innovate and hire again. But right now they're being penalized both from a tax standpoint and a regulatory standpoint, and it's really hurting employment in our state. So
right.
have a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. How about the relationship with the governor not only on a day-to-day basis, but dealing with major things? I know that is it fair to say that your main responsibility, as we mentioned, would be presiding over the Senate here in North Carolina? But talk a little bit about not only that as the main focus, but the relationship with the governor and working on a day-to-day basis and how that works. Well,
I'm running obviously on the Republican ticket for Lieutenant Governor, so the hope would be that we would have a Republican governor from my perspective.
Right.
And certainly if you do, then the working relationship becomes much easier, and the Lieutenant Governor would then be a surrogate for the governor in many instances. And if the governor wants to pass on things to the Lieutenant Governor, he or she can choose to do so. That would be a preference. You'd want to take on the things. It's a governor's big job. Right. There's a lot going on. Right. There's really more on their plate than they can really handle. So to have a a working relationship with a lieutenant governor is very important.
Well, that's why I mention it, because it's different than, like, the president, who kind of says, okay, here's who I want to come along as my vice president.
Yeah.
You, like you say, you could be dealing with a Democratic governor.
Yeah.
If that happens, maybe you have to kind of put aside a little bit of personal, but you have to figure out how to work together.
That's right.
And you hate to say that could become a problem, but obviously it can. So I'm sure that's something you've given much thought to, because obviously with Governor Perdue being there now, so you just have to look for ways to kind of bring it together and work for the better good of the state. So.
Find the places where you have commonalities
Right.
and work towards things to, again, make North Carolina a better state. Certainly you do that. And at the same time, you do have a loud voice on things like the North Carolina School Board. And so even if you stand ideologically different in a different position than the governor, you can be a loud voice, have a bully pulpit, so to speak, for those types of issues.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we're going to divide up the interview and take a quick break here, and we'll get back with some more questions. Dan Forrest, running for Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina. We'll take a quick break and come back with more. You're watching the WHIG TV Morning Show, brought to you by Don Bullock Chevrolet. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
About that. Yeah.
And welcome back to the WHIG TV Morning Show, brought to you by Don Bullock Chevrolet. Dan Forrest, our guest, running for Lieutenant Governor. We appreciate you taking that. I mean, you came quite a distance to
Thanks for having me.
Be with us this morning. So thank you very much.
All the way from the big city of Raleigh.
That's right. That's right. Hey, we don't get guests out of Raleigh too often, so I mean, we kind of have.
They don't want to get up in the mornings, okay?
So we appreciate that. We have quite a great audience that tunes in every morning.
We do.
We know they're excited to get to meet you. During the break, we were talking about 3 major issues that will come up for the Lieutenant Governor, but before we get to that, you had a question that you wanted to mention, and then we'll get into education, jobs, and immigration. I wanted to touch on those a little bit. So.
Well, Dan, you founded the Triangle Leadership Forum.
That's right.
Tell us about that. What is that?
Triangle Leadership Forum is really a discipleship program for young Christian men and their wives. It's a 2-year program, and over that 2-year time, we walk through really 4 major areas of life, and it's leadership, character, family, and kingdom building. And it is really taking young men and young women that are at somewhere between the ages of 35 and 45 generally, kind of in the prime of their life. A lot of things are demanded from them at that time. They're busy.
Exactly.
Their churches are demanding things, their jobs are demanding things, and they don't really know how to balance life. Or they're having struggles with that oftentimes. And so we help them deal with that balance and figure out how to do that in a Christ-centered way. And we have speakers on a monthly basis and a lot of weekend retreats and those types of things to help them do that.
You're also on the board of the Wake Forest Pregnancy Support Service.
I was. That was several years ago. I was the chair of the board of Pregnancy Center in Wake Forest. Really got that thing up and running, and it's doing quite well now. But the whole life issue is one that's very important to me and to my wife as well. We've been involved with it for quite some time.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Well, I mean, and that to me is the core of a lot of issues. Is family stability.
Yeah.
Obviously, we were talking a little bit off the set. You've got 4 children, so obviously family is very important to you. So to have those values and those principles is something that a lot of people look for as people are running for different offices. I think that's great. But that really is kind of the source of a lot of today's problems. Is what starts within the walls of their own home. So just to see someone like yourself that has had experience in dealing with those type of, it comes from a large family, working with these organizations that promote good family values as well as religion. So
yeah, I had when I was younger, not that much younger, but 16 years ago or so, I had a group of older men come into my life and mentor me and walk alongside me and kind of teach me what it meant to be a Christian man in the workplace and in my family and that sort of thing. And so I wanted to do the same and give back to the people of Raleigh. And there's other guys that are on this board with me as well, other couples rather. And we've been doing this for about 10 years now, and so a couple hundred folks that have gone through that program. So it's been quite a blessing.
That is great. That is great. Anything else in that spectrum there?
No, I'm good with that.
All right. We were talking during the commercial break, Dan, about some of the major issues that the lieutenant governor would have to face. Any lieutenant governor, but particularly in today's, and you mentioned three major ones. Obviously, education being at the top, jobs. And within the job is how money is being spent. I think that's kind of like, wow, I mean, something really has to be done there. And also illegal immigration were the three things that you mentioned that were really on your mind as you prepare for this campaign. Let's start with education.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on education, where we stand in the state, and what would you plan to do in that regard?
Again, the position of Lieutenant Governor sitting on the state school board is an important one, having a lot of appointment powers to the education world, and the Lieutenant Governor just historically has gotten involved in this issue quite deeply. But we're ranked 41st in the nation in K-12 education. Only 9 states that have a bigger challenge than we do here, and my position is that it's time to make some major changes, and not just in North Carolina, but really nationwide, for our children to be competitive. We're failing our kids, and so we really have to do something about this. 62% of our kids that go on to, they're adults at this point, but go on to a college, have to take remedial reading and remedial math classes. So we're graduating kids that can't even read and do math through our K-12 process. So we have to make some changes. I believe that that fundamentally starts with breaking the bureaucracy or the monopoly on education. I call it a monopoly because there really aren't any other choices of what gets done with that public money, so to speak. So in the business world, when you break a monopoly, you get increased competition, quality generally goes up, your costs are driven down, and you get innovation. And that's the most important thing, is innovation. And we haven't innovated in our state in 100 years in education because bureaucracy and innovation really sit at opposite ends of the spectrum. And so I believe that breaking that monopoly, introducing choice into the mix, allowing parents to have the choice of where their kids go to school and how they educate their kids, that tide will raise all the ships. And public school will get better, and all education will get better at the same time.
We mentioned I have a first grader and a pre-K, and obviously one of the things that's concerned me greatly, as I've seen, is in an effort to cut some things on the education level, taking out teachers' assistants and things like that. We're seeing a widespread situation where we're losing more and more teachers' assistants. Where do you feel like the majority of the funds or the emphasis would need to go? Does it start at an elementary level, or if you could have your weight be as to where the majority of it would be focused on, does it start there?
I don't know that one grade level or one time period in life is more important than the next. I think we're really dropping the ball in a lot of areas. But you mentioned the cuts and where the cuts are taking place. Well, interestingly enough, the cuts aren't really taking place in the bureaucracy of education. So in North Carolina, for example, it costs $13,000 a year to educate a student in public school for a year. That includes the capital expenditures that you pick up at the county level. So $13,000 a year in public school, $8,000 a year for a charter school because they don't get those capital expenditures, and then $6,000 on average in private school, on average in North Carolina. So for less than half of what we can educate our kids for in public school, we can educate them for in private school. Why is that? Because there are 5,000 bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. At the Department of Education. There's 800 in Raleigh at the Department of Public Instruction, telling you right here in Rocky Mount how to educate your kids. The model is upside down, and we need to right size it again, put the money back at the level of the teachers, the local school districts, and allow them to teach. Obviously there's going to be some oversight by the state, and obviously we're not going to get rid of the Department of Education, but we need to flip that model upside down, or right side up rather, and put the emphasis back where it needs to be.
Absolutely.
Let's go to jobs. Let's talk about jobs. What in the world are we going to do to create jobs?
Yeah, it's a very interesting model now. You look at all these jobs that got shipped overseas to either to Mexico or to China, other parts of the world for manufacturing, textiles, furniture, all the things that were built on in this state. Our state was built on this kind of market. And even in those markets, those jobs are gone now. Those jobs have been automated.
Right.
You know, textile jobs will never come back the way they were. Furniture jobs will never come back the way they were. So what do you have to do? I believe we have to innovate at a much faster pace than we've ever innovated before. We have to create new industries, new technologies, new ways of working, and perhaps those those blue collar jobs become more white collar jobs. They come in with higher pay levels, but we're educating our kids in a different way as well. So first and foremost, we have to get the burden of government off the backs of businesses. I mean, that's just a primary thing that has to happen right now. Again, I mentioned we have the highest corporate income tax rate in the Southeast. I believe we should eliminate the corporate income tax. Drop the rate over time. None of these things happen overnight. We didn't get here in a year. We're not going to get back in a year. But put a plan into place over a 10-year period to become the #1 state for business in the country. I don't believe we have 10 years, quite frankly. So we have to do some things pretty rapidly. But cut the corporate income tax rate. Make it a tax-friendly state for small businesses. Create a new rate for those people that file under personal income tax rate, file for their businesses under personal income tax rate. Create a lower rate for them because they're really getting penalized for owning a business. Personally, they're getting penalized for their personal income tax. We need to reduce the gas tax in North Carolina to be competitive with our Southeast neighbors. Now, people will say to me all the time, well, what happens to that revenue? You know, how do we pay for roads? Well, we've had a highway fund and a highway trust fund in our state for years that got robbed by politicians.
Thank you. That has been a big issue here, Dan, with toll roads.
With the tolling
Our community is having a fit about these toll roads.
As they should.
Yeah.
As they should. You know, we've been taxed enough. Why do we need to get taxed? We have the highest gas tax rate, one of the highest in the country. Why do we need toll roads? So, you know, when you have something like a trust fund in government, I believe you should take that trust fund out of the hands of the politicians, put it in the hands of people that know how to run a trust fund that you can trust, that you're going to make sure that money is going to be there long term. And we know that if that money had stayed in the highway fund and the highway trust fund over all those years until today, we'd have enough money to build new roads, to take care of existing roads, and to fix all our bridges. And infrastructure is a primary responsibility of government. So you really have to get this money out of the hands of politicians who love playing that little game of moving money around and paying for the general fund and all that.
And how about the word accountability? I mean, who in this whole structure holds these people accountable? Is it the people? Is it the elect? I mean, who gets in there and says, you know what, some of this stuff going on is ridiculous.
That's right.
And call some hands on some things. I mean, how do we get control of that?
Well, you've heard the adage that power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so I think by the time that some things get bad enough, they're even out of the hands of the people to control. You know, we have some major issues that the people of North Carolina can't touch. You know, they've gone too far. And so it's going to take a new breed of leadership going to Raleigh, both in the General Assembly, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Council of State races, to be really bold and courageous about some of the things that have to happen in this state. And I just tell people every day, I say, we need to run government the way businesses run. If business was run the way government was run, all businesses would be out of business. We'd all be broke. Quite frankly, our government's broke.
Our government's broke. That's
we have
what
$30 billion in our state worth of unfunded liabilities. $30 billion worth of promises we've made to future generations that we have no money in the bank to pay for. We have, you know, billions of dollars, maybe over $100 billion of debt in our state, even though we have a balanced budget. So these things are real issues.
Getting control of that spending is major. Well,
spending, for example, over the last 30 years in spending, if we had started in 1980 and started to hold our budget constant for population growth and inflation, our general fund budget in 2010 would have been $10 billion, but right now it's $20 billion. We're spending twice as much as we should be spending based on growth and based on inflation. So we just have politicians that like to spend our money.
Wow, and I like the word innovation that you used when you were first talking about the jobs. Is almost, you hear the term thinking outside of the box, but that's kind of like, I mean, that's kind of what you're saying, is we have to adapt to the times that we're in.
That's right.
If things aren't working the way they're working, let's create something based on the times we live in that will help us advance and get to the next level. I think that was a really good point.
It's, you know, having an architecture background, as I mentioned, you know, part of our job is to create a vision, to cast a long-term vision, to plan, to, you know, creative problem solving long-term. And so one of the things I'd like to do within the General Assembly and the executive leadership is help craft a long-term vision for North Carolina. what are we going to look like 50 years from now, 100 years from now, and start the process of putting a strategic plan in place to get there. You know, you have to think way down the road right now, and live in the present, but you have to think way down the road.
Absolutely. Dan Forrest, candidate for Lieutenant Governor. We talked about the three-headed monster, if we can call it that: education, jobs, illegal immigration. I want to give you a few moments to touch on illegal immigration, which is a huge issue, and how you would tackle that.
Well, people will ask me all the time, what's the biggest issue as you travel around the state? And most people, I think, would say it was jobs or education.
Right.
It really is illegal immigration. This is the one that everybody wants to talk about, and I think it's because we haven't done anything to deal with this issue.
We really haven't.
Half a century, and nobody's really touched it in any real way, and it's gotten to a point where we make excuses for you know, all kinds of issues within this issue, but we're 42nd in the nation in illegal immigration. There's only 8 states with a greater problem than we have.
Wow.
So we have somewhere between 600,000 and 1.2 million illegal aliens living in our state right now. It costs our state $1.3 billion at a minimum. And so there's financial impacts, there's social impacts, cultural impacts, there's all kinds of things. And I'd like to be the point person for this issue in state government to start the dialogue, both sides of the aisle. Start the dialogue about how we're going to deal with this. Start the dialogue with the farmers down east. Agriculture, it's a huge issue with agriculture. You know, employ a lot of these folks, and with hospitals, it's costing hospitals millions, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Law enforcement is costing tens of millions of dollars in law enforcement. So we have to pull all these people to the table, teachers, schools, and figure out what we're going to do as a state. Other states around the country have started to deal with this, and so we have to pull people together and really start planning for our future.
Well, it's something that affects all of us in some degree, because as I was listening to you talk about that, it's stuff that because of one effect, as you mentioned on the police department, that's going to be passed down to something else, which will be passed down to something else, and then so we can't sit back and look at that and say, well, I don't directly deal with that, so it doesn't really affect me a ton, but as you mentioned, the gradual process of seeing how those effects trickle down, people have to look at that and say these are real issues, and be willing to deal with them and tackle them. So.
That's right. I think this issue really could cost our state a couple $2 billion a year, which is about 1/10 of our general fund budget, and we just ignore it. We're literally just ignoring this issue. And so it's for me, as much as anything, it's a rule of law issue. We are a nation of laws. America is a great nation because we are a nation of laws, and we pay attention to those laws and we protect them. This is one that we don't protect, and I think we have to figure out how to deal with this before it's too late.
Absolutely, absolutely. Dan Forrest, like as we say, candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Those were the main things that we wanted to discuss, like you say, education, jobs, illegal immigration, the big topics. Very impressed with your background, as we mentioned, and really like a lot of the things that you have said.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with your views. I really am.
I was just sitting here kind of like, I'm kind of like ready to pump my fist in all honesty, kind of like, wow, this is, I really like. I want to give you just a couple of moments to for a few closing thoughts, maybe something we haven't touched on, or information, websites people can go get more information on you and the campaign and all that. So we'll give you a moment to do that.
Sure. Well, you know, I believe that this is our generation 1776. I really believe that this election cycle we're in is a tipping point for America. I think that November 6th we make a great decision as whether we tip over into socialism or whether we save the great American experiment, and that's what lies on the line for really, I believe, maybe truly the first time in the history of our nation. And so I would encourage everybody out in your audience to get involved, to pick a candidate. There's a lot of great candidates out there running. Pick a candidate, get involved, stand behind them, put your time and energy and money behind these candidates, and go work for them, because it really will make a difference. One person can make a difference. Our website is danforrest.com. That's Forrest with one R, danforrest.com. Up on the screen, okay? And we've won a couple national awards with the website, best website in the nation for a statewide congressional campaign. So yeah, we're proud of that.
That is good.
And it's a great website. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter as well. We also have a big RV with wrapped with Dan Forrest on it. We're taking it around the state. We'll be coming back to your community soon in April, and letting the people know when we do. And we'd love to meet the folks from your viewing audience and have them come out and ask us questions.
Yeah, stay in touch with us on that.
Yeah, we will.
We'll get you back and to do that now.
If you see a big RV that says "Run, Forrest, Run,"
that's right.
you know that's Dan Forrest. That's the first thing I said to him when he walked in the door. Very catchy, and that's what you have to get people's attention. So you've done a good job of that. Your people have. So thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we really
Absolutely
appreciate you
enjoyed
taking
it.
the time to do this.
Absolutely.
It's been a very informative, great segment. Dan Forrest, candidate for Lieutenant Governor here in the wonderful state of North Carolina, has been our guest. Wonderful family, like I said, the wife and the youngest. They were in here, and maybe she decided she wanted to take a little walk this morning. Well, we appreciate you being with us.
Thank you.
And you're watching the WHIG TV Morning Show, brought to you by Don Bullock Chevrolet. We'll be right back with Fred's final look at weather and a couple more headlines to wrap up the show. Stay with us.